Did God know what they were going to do? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I have no question about God's foreknowledge, but it's not God's fault that they don't get to enter the promised land here. We read till about, tell you what, let's back up to verse 21 in Numbers 13 and set the stage again. 12 spies have been sent out. They've been given their mission objectives by Moses. And it says, verse 21, the spies went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin as far as Rehob, near the entrance of Hamath. And they went up through the south, came to Hebron. Ahiman, Shishai, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, were there. Hebron was built 7 years before Zon in Egypt. Then they came to the valley of Eshcol, and there cut down a branch with one cluster of grapes. They carried it between two of them on a pole. They also brought some of the pomegranates and figs. The place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster which the men of Israel cut down there. The word Eshcol means cluster. They returned from spying out the land after 40 days. Nikki and I keep talking about the numbers 40 and 50 that show up and keep repeating and cycling. And so every time I run across one now, I'm thinking about our discussions. Verse 26. So they've done what Moses told them to do. They've examined the land the way they're supposed to. So far, they've been faithful. So far. Verse 26, it says, they departed, came back to Moses and Aaron, all the congregation of children of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them, to all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. Then they told him and said, we went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Now, if they had stopped their report there, would they have gotten a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Thumbs up, right? If they had stopped their report right there. Unfortunately, that's not where they stopped. And it's generally not a good sign to start the next verse with nevertheless. So everything's positive for about a verse and a half. Nevertheless, verse 28, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the mountains. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the banks of the Jordan. And again, to this point, other than that nevertheless in verse 28, they have been reporting what they were charged to report. Moses wanted them to find out what kind of people, where the people were, what kinds of cities they were, that they resided in this case, fortified cities. So you've got, it's to this point, it hasn't gone totally upside down. Let's say it that way. It's obvious, however, that it is already discouraging the people, because look at verse 30. Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it. Again, thumbs up or thumbs down? Thumbs up, right? Caleb is definitely thumbs up. We know that. We've read the rest of the story. Here's where everything goes not just sideways, but upside down. But the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. Here's where it really turns. They gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they'd spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants. It's flowing with milk and honey. It's lush, it's fertile, it's already established. It devours its inhabitants. Now, where are they when they're giving this report? Where are the people? They're in the wilderness. That's the kind of land you would generally describe as devouring its people. Kind of like the bottom of Paladuro Canyon or something like that. Rough, rugged land. They just came out of almost Garden of Eden type setting. But he says, it's a land that devours its inhabitants. All the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. There we saw the giants. The descendants of Anak came from the giants. We were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. A couple of things they're doing. One, are they looking with eyes of faith or eyes of flesh? Eyes of flesh. Two, if you're viewing the land, and let's say, how many different groups have they already named? Okay, you've got descendants of Anak, Amalekites, Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Canaanites. So they've named 6 groups. If you're considering them as a whole, that would represent a tremendous large army. How are they going to go about conquering the land? Are they going to be dealing with all six nations of people at the same time? No, he sends them one city, one city, one city. They're trying to chew the whole corn cob, and the way God's going to have them do it is to just take a bite at a time and take out the main centers that would represent resistance. But again, they're looking with eyes of flesh, not of faith. And who do the people listen to? So you've got on one side, let's see, sheep's on Jesus' right. So we'll go over here. You've got on one side, you've got Moses. We're going to assume Aaron is there with him. And you've got Joshua and Caleb, right? These are the positive voices, even though Moses isn't saying so much right now. On the other side, how many spies does that leave? You've got 10 on this side, and they're unanimous in their conclusion. These 10 represented some substantial leaders and champions of their tribes. They weren't just your average folks. These were leaders, recognized leaders. Everything should have pointed them toward faith. So the people make a choice. Chapter 14, verse 1. Yes, sir.
What would they possibly gain by making that decision? Even if it lacked God in the decision. They're wandering out in the desert is what I'm getting. I'm trying to understand.
Me too. Now, to give you an analogy. Okay, Perry's not in here yet. Who played football in high school? Okay, Ray, you played football in high school. Your whole team is your size. And you find out that the team that you're going to play tonight, they step off the bus, and every one of them is 1.5 foot taller than you and 1 foot broader. I was afraid of that. That's my point. What is the common reaction when you see that? There's just no way we can compete. So Israel sends these spies in, to be clear, sends these spies in, and you've got this little band of men, and they go through and they see a fortified city. Jericho should have been totally impregnable, right? Jerusalem should have been totally impregnable from just a strategic mindset. There was good justification in that regard if you took God out of the equation. How much battle experience does Israel have by this time? That's a pretty missing link.
Glory of God.
Yes. But Israel's only had, a couple. How did they defeat Egypt? They ran. That's not going to work too well in the Promised Land. They did have one battle where Joshua leads and wins a great victory. But these are not battle-hardened troops. These are shepherds and slaves that have, what they've learned is just what they've picked up in the last year and a half. So to be fair to the guys, from a human standpoint, what stretched before them did look impossible from a human standpoint. Mark? Yes, Susan. Sorry. He was pointing at you. Not yet.
Okay, so I was trying to say they're not completely in the wilderness, but some choose to be with them.
Yes. No, we're not to that point.
But I also was going to say that's what we all knowing God's gonna take us one step at a time, it's all gonna be fine, you know, we all do that.
We all do that. Well, I'm sorry. I'm like the trembling army sitting there looking at Goliath across the battlefield. I'd love to be David, but a lot of times I'm not. Dennis, you were next.
Out of Egypt, defeating the most powerful government in the world at that time, without bringing them into the promised land?
Joshua and Caleb did. How's that? But the rest, the people have responded. As a matter of fact, by the time we get to the end of all of this, he's going to be talking about that they've tested him 10 times already. So this isn't just the first time Israel's looked at the problem and not the provider. This is her track record. The people are remarkably consistent at forgetting God. Remarkably. And so this is just a continuation in the pattern. Unfortunately for them, this is the one that kind of seals their fate, the older generation. Doug?
32, because they're fearful and because they're faithless, they go on to embellishing the report, said all the people are of great stature. Okay, they're exaggerating somewhat.
Just a little.
But also, back up in verse 26, the 12 spies will report to all the congregation. Joshua is no dumber, okay, because in Joshua 2:23, when the two spies come back from Jericho, they report to Joshua and not to all people.
Yeah, that was probably not the best choice on Moses' part. Although, to be fair, I could see them going to their own household first and going, by the way, pack everything up. We're headed back to Egypt. Okay, Moses, if they're human. But the people have been remarkably consistent in forgetting God. That's not going to change. God has a purpose for this. He knows what they're going to do, but he gives them the opportunity nevertheless. Okay, 14:1. So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. See, I also think that's why Joshua sent 2 spies and not 12. All he needed was 2 good ones, and we'd have been good here. All the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron. Here they go again. Again, consistent. And the whole congregation said to them, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness. Now, those are 2 wish statements. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, let us select a leader and return to Egypt. Now, you want to see evidence of God's grace? I'm sorry, wouldn't you have said, go ahead and go? Done with you. I'll keep these 4 and we'll start over. God is long-suffering. Verse 5, and Moses and Aaron, this is what Moses does. He intercedes steadily. Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. But Joshua, so Moses and Aaron fall on their faces, Joshua and Caleb are not. And Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out their land, tore their clothes. And they spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, the land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. And that just continues to be repeated. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Since you went to Joshua a minute ago, let's go over there just for a minute, because it's remarkably similar. Let's see. I didn't think to look this up, but Okay, where's the spies? Chapter 2, thank you. Joshua chapter 2, verses 8 and following. Joshua, this is going to be 40 years later. You've got the new generation has entered the promised land. He sent 2 spies to spy out Jericho, and Jericho, they show up, the doors are being shut, and so Rahab takes them and hides them. Verse 8, it says, before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. 40 years later, Rahab is echoing the same thing Joshua and Caleb said 40 years before. The fight's gone out of them. Their hearts have just melted. Verse 11, as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. What Joshua and Caleb says is consistently proven out. And they know it even with this calamity that's about to happen. So back in Numbers 14, it said, they are our bread. Verse 9, their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. And all the congregation said to stone them with stones. Boy, they're ramping up their game. Now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of meeting before all the children of Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will these people reject me? How long will they not believe me with all the signs which I performed among them? Here we go, Dennis, all the signs I performed among them. I will strike them with the pestilence and disinherit them, and I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they. And Moses did what Moses does. Then the Egyptians will hear it. For by your might you brought these people up from among them, and they will tell it to the inhabitants of this land. They have heard that you, Lord, are among these people, that you, Lord, are seen to face, and your cloud stands above them, and you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day, in a pillar of fire by night. Now if you kill these people as one man, then the nations which have heard of your fame will speak, saying, because the Lord was not able to bring this people to the land which he swore to give to them, therefore he killed them in the wilderness. Now I pray, let the power of my Lord be great, just as you have spoken, saying the Lord is long-suffering, abundant in mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression. He by no means clears the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the 3rd and 4th generation. Pardon the iniquity of this people, I pray, according to the greatness of your mercy, just as you have forgiven this people from Egypt even until now. And the Lord responds, I have pardoned according to your word. But truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. Because all these men who have seen my glory, the signs which I did in Egypt, in the wilderness, have put me to the test now these 10 times, have not heeded my voice, they certainly shall not see the land of which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who rejected me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit in him, has followed me fully, I will bring into the land where he went, and his descendants shall inherit it. Now the Amalekites and Canaanites dwell in the valley. Tomorrow turn and move out into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. Let's keep reading. 26, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, how long shall I bear with this evil congregation who complain against me? I've heard the complaints which the children of Israel make against me. Say to them, as I live, says the Lord, just as you have spoken in my hearing, so I will do to you. The carcasses of you who have complained against me shall fall in this wilderness, all of you who were numbered, according to your entire number, from 20 years old and above. Except for Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun, you shall by no means enter the land which I swore I would make you dwell in. But your little ones, whom you said would be victims, I will bring in. They shall know the land which you have despised. As for you, your carcasses shall fall in this wilderness. Your sons shall be shepherds in the wilderness 40 years, bear the brunt of your infidelity. until your carcasses are consumed in the wilderness, according to the number of days in which you spied out the land, 40 days. For each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year, namely 40 years, and you shall know my rejection. I, the Lord, have spoken this. I will surely do so to all this evil congregation who are gathered together against me. In this wilderness they shall be consumed, and there they shall die. Now the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land, who returned and made all the congregation complain against him by bringing a bad report of the land, these very men who brought the evil report about the land died by the plague before the Lord. Joshua the son of Nun, Caleb the son of Jephunneh remained alive of the men who went to spy out the land. Okay, at this point, how many people have actually laid eyes on the promised land? 12, right? Has Moses seen it? Not yet. They were camped a good distance away. They sent the spies across. 12 people out of all of this, so many million, 2 to 5 million people, 12 have actually witnessed and seen the promise that Israel had longed for since the days of Abraham. When everything's said and done, how many are left that have seen the land? Just 2. Everybody else only gets to keep dreaming about it. And if you're Joshua and Caleb and you've seen what God has in store for you, don't you know the thought of, we got to wait 40 years? Oh man, I'd already picked the place where I was going to string my hammock, one of those type deals. Everybody else, none of the rest of them have seen the land. Aaron will die before he sees the land. Miriam will die before she sees the land. Only Moses gets a glimpse of it from the top of the mountain because God shows it to him. But he too dies before he enters. Nobody else has even seen the place. So they have no clue other than what's been brought back. Well, the 10 voices have been silenced, and Joshua and Caleb have delivered their report. The people weren't paying attention. They wouldn't listen to them. But I find it really curious. Now, when it says his prayer about long-suffering, go back to verse, 18. Look at verse 18. He by no means clears the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the 3rd and 4th generation. Is he doing that here? Is it just the current generation who's 20 years old and above? Are they the only ones who are penalized? Okay, you've got 40 years. That's another 2 generations at least. So everybody 20 years and younger and the generation that follows, they're going to bear part of the consequence of the older generation's sin. It's not that they are facing the same fate, but they still have to deal with the consequences, the leftovers of the older generation's sin, and they have to spend the next 40 years waiting on the older generation to die. It's just one of those things that it does play out just like that. They're not being punished for their sin, but they are having to deal with the fallout from that sin. Questions, comments? Okay, finish 14 with me. Verse 39, Moses told these words to all the children of Israel, and the people mourned greatly. They rose early in the morning, went up to the top of the mountain, saying, "Here we are. We will go up to the place which the Lord has promised, for we have sinned." Well, yes, you did, but no, the door's shut. Moses said, "Now why do you transgress the command of the Lord? This will not succeed. Do not go up, lest you be defeated by your enemies, for the Lord is not among you. The Amalekites, the Canaanites are there before you. You shall fall by the sword, because you have turned away from the Lord. The Lord will not be with you." But they presumed to go up to the mountaintop. Nevertheless, neither the ark of the covenant of the Lord nor Moses departed from the camp. Then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who dwelt in that mountain came down and attacked them, drove them back as far as Hormah. So you've got this, it appears, sizable army that assembles now that it's too late, but they don't go up fighting in the power of the Lord the way they could have had they made the choice. It's just one of those. We know it's coming. We've read this story so many times. We know it pretty well by heart. Doesn't it still leave you kind of feeling like it's a tragedy that they do this? You know, every time you watch a movie that has a bad ending, and every time you watch it, you ever find yourself going, well, maybe they'll get it right this time? Maybe not. Okay. But we know they made their choice. God honors their choice and actually says, okay, I'm going to give you just what you wanted. You are going to die right here in this wilderness. You didn't want the land. That's what you're going to get. And he is faithful. Okay. Chapter 15, the first part of it is going back to some of the sacrifices and some of the ritual that he once addressed. And again, it's very detailed. I'm not going to spend much time there. I do want to jump over to chapter 15, starting verse 22, and look at the difference here. Now, if your translation has something other than the word I'm going to point out, let me know, would you? I didn't have time to compare all the translations. Verse 22, mine says, if you sin unintentionally. Anybody have a different word there in their translation? Unwittingly? Okay. Erred. Oh, E-R-R-E-D. Oh, okay, I got you. I was thinking A-I-R-E-D, and okay, got you, okay. Okay, if you sin unintentionally and do not observe all these commandments, which the Lord has spoken to Moses, all that the Lord has commanded you by the hand of Moses from the day the Lord gave commandment onward throughout your generation, then it will be, if it is unintentionally committed, without the knowledge of the congregation, that the whole congregation shall offer one young bull as a burnt offering. And he goes on and he talks about the atonement that's available for the unintentional sin. Verse 25, the priest shall make atonement for the whole congregation of the children of Israel. It shall be given them, for it was unintentional. They shall bring their offering. Okay. And continues with that distinction. Verse 29, he says, you shall have one law for him who sins unintentionally, for him who's native born among the children of Israel, for the stranger who dwells among them. Verse 30, but the person who does anything, now the New King James says presumptuously, but the footnote is more accurate when it says does something with a high hand. It's basically like you're shaking your fist at God. One of those, if you know, I'm going to do this regardless. That's referred to as a sin of the high hand. And he's just talked about what the provision he makes for forgiveness for the unintentional sin. It says the person who does anything presumptuously, whether he is native born or a stranger, that one brings reproach on the Lord. He shall be cut off from among his people, because he has despised the word of the Lord, has broken his commandment. That person shall be completely cut off. His guilt shall be upon him. And then you find out for sure what the cut off means. Look at 32, case study. It says, while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. Those who found him gathering sticks brought him to Moses and Aaron, to all the congregation. They put him under guard because it had not been explained what should be done to him. Really? Isn't that what he just said? Okay. The Lord said to Moses, the man must surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp. As the Lord commanded Moses, all the congregation brought him outside the camp, stoned him with stones, and he died. That's just one of those graphic, that would make this part of the story, what kind of rating would that give it? That would rank it up there, wouldn't it? Everybody's supposed to be, yes, sir.
Like in, starting somewhere around 22 or 23, it says, if you sin unintentionally, if it is unintentionally committed without the knowledge of the congregation, that the whole congregation shall offer one young bull. Well, if it's unbeknownst to them,
Well, the assumption is it comes to light, okay? They didn't know it. They didn't know it when it was happening. Maybe we could say it that way. But then it comes to light. You're going to. The goal of the sacrifice is to remove the reproach, remove the defilement from the camp. And so the congregation offers. We already have individual sacrifices for sin earlier in Moses' record. We won't go back to all those. But this removes the defilement from the camp so that God's wrath doesn't have to break out against them.
they find evidence of sin.
It doesn't tell us how it comes to light. So maybe they're discovered. Maybe somebody stumbles across the evidence of a sin done in. It's not really a sin done in secret because those can still be intentional. What I think of my 22. Jump ahead just a little bit to same book. It's chapter 25. I'm looking for the verse. Here it is, yes. Numbers 25, and we'll be there before very long, but you're coming up against Balaam and Balak. He's tried to curse Israel. God won't let him. And so they come up with another way to try and tear Israel down. They invite the people to the sacrifices of their gods, it says in 25:2. Verse 1 says the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. And so you've got this, they couldn't take them on face first, and so they have to come in from the side very slyly, and it seems to be somewhat effective. Now drop down, let's see. Moses is given instructions to kill off the men who were joined to Baal of Peor, which means they interacted with the Moabite woman in the sexual act. That was a part of their worship. That's what we're talking about. Look at verse 6. It says, "Indeed, one of the children of Israel came and presented to his brethren a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses and in the sight of all the congregation of Israel, who were weeping at the door of the tabernacle of meeting." That's the opposite. The one is an unintentional sin that the people are not made aware of, that they don't see it when it happens. They either find out about it later or the person confesses a sin, something like that. This is the opposite of that. He not only is going to do what God has just condemned to death, he's not only going to do it, he makes sure everybody sees it. Everybody knows what he's about to do and takes her into the tent. It's not going to work. Verse 7, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saw it. He rose from among the congregation, took a javelin in his hand. He went after the men of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her body. He came in and he did one in the sight of Israel, and it was obvious this is something he was going to do, and he really didn't care about the consequences. He probably did just a few moments later, but he didn't care about it. So that's the contrast. That's a better example of the one who acts with a high hand. Doing it in front of the whole congregation. He doesn't care who knows it. He's proud of it. And yeah, God will not tolerate that. So for me, that's one of the most vivid illustrations of this section. We good? Okay, good. Let's see. We can get into Korah's rebellion, can't we? At least start it. Okay. Look at chapter 16. We've heard this story, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. These are all out of the tribe of Levi. And so they're not priests, but they're Levites. So Levites they're not on the same plane as far as ranking with God, not on the same plane as the rest of the congregation of Israel, right? They get to get a little bit closer to God. They have access to the court of the tabernacle. They are responsible for assembling and tearing down the tabernacle and transporting the items. But they can't do priestly acts because they're not descendants of Aaron. And yet, it seems these guys decide they should be allowed to. And so it talks about Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Verse 2, it says they took men, verse 2, and they rose up before Moses with some of the children of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, representatives of the congregation, men of renown. They gathered together against Moses and Aaron. This is such a continuing refrain. It just every time you turn around. Against Moses and Aaron, said to them, you take too much upon yourselves. All the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves among the assembly of the Lord? Well, that's tough. When Moses heard it, he fell on his face. He spoke to Korah and all his company, saying, tomorrow morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy. Will cause him to come near to him. That one whom he chooses, he will cause him to come near to him. Remember, when you're talking about the Levites, again, the best way to depict it is who has closer access to God. The high priest has the closest. Well, once Moses dies. Right now Moses does. The high priest will have the closest access to God. The priests under him will have a little further away from God, but closer than everybody else. The Levites are under them, a little further away and yet closer to God than the people, and then the people are out here. And Korah wants to get up here same level as all the priests. Maybe he wants to get up where Aaron is. I don't know. Where did I let off? Bring you near to himself to do. Okay, here we go. Moses, verse 8. Moses turns the accusation back on them in verse 7. He says, put fire in them in your censers, and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow. It shall be that the man whom the Lord chooses is the Holy One. You take too much upon yourselves, you sons of Levi. They're accusing Moses of touting his, what's a good description for that? They're claiming Moses is basically strutting his relationship with God before the people. And Moses said, no, but you are. Verse 8, hear now, you sons of Levi. Is it a small thing to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do the work of the tabernacle of the Lord, to stand before the congregation to serve them, that he has brought you near to himself, you and all your brethren, the sons of Levi with you? Are you seeking the priesthood also? Therefore you and all your company are gathered together against the Lord. What is Aaron that you complain against him? And Moses tries to call the other two rebellious leaders, Dathan and Abiram, and they're not willing to come up. Verse 13, but hear their accusation. Again, against Moses. Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, that you should keep acting like a prince over us? Now, which land are they talking about? I kind of think it's Egypt. They use the same language that God had used to describe the promised land, which was never said about Egypt. They're using it, it seems, to refer to Egypt because they'd rather live back there as slaves with all their needs being met. And they blame Moses. Moreover, you've not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey. He tried. The opportunity was there. Nor give us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Why? Because the people rejected it. He said, will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. Moses was very angry. Said to the Lord, do not respect their offering. I've not taken one donkey from them, nor have I hurt one of them. Tomorrow you and all, Moses said to Korah, tomorrow you and all your company be present before the Lord, you and they as well as Aaron. Let each take his censer and put incense in it. So that's the act of a priest offering incense before the Lord. Each of you bring his censer before the Lord, 250 censers, both you and Aaron, each with his censer. So every man took his censer, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and stood at the door of the tabernacle of meeting with Moses and Aaron. And if you remember Leviticus, that was only to be done by the priests, not Levites. 19. Korah gathered all the congregation against them at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. So again, the people seem to be supporting the wrong horse again. The glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. So he's going to take all the people out, because they had backed Korah. They fell on their faces and said, O God, the God of the spirits and of all flesh, shall one man sin, and you be angry with all the congregation? The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the congregation, saying, get away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Okay, we'll set the stage just a second. Moses rose and went to Dathan and Abiram. The elders of Israel followed him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, depart now from the tents of these wicked men. Touch nothing of theirs, lest you be consumed in all their sins. And they got away, and it says, Dathan and Abiram came out, stood at the door of their tents with their wives, their sons, and their little children. By this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of my own will. If these men die naturally like all men, or if they're visited by the common fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. Now stop there just for a second. Okay, Russ, you're going to be Korah. Is that okay? Just for illustration purposes. Okay, now you're going to be Korah, and God, through Moses, is telling all the people to get away from Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. How far away do you have to be? We don't know. The people are obedient in the sense that they do give them some space. But when God does what he's about to do, it sounds like some of them didn't get far enough away. Or at least they were terrified that they weren't. Because he's calling God to do something he's never done before. At least not that's recorded. So right now there'd be this huge circle around Russ, and once this starts, they're going to be trying to make the circle bigger. Okay? Verse 30. But if the Lord creates a new thing, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the pit, then you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord. Is that the first sinkhole? It came to pass, as he finished speaking all these words, that the ground split apart under them. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households, all the men with Korah, with all their goods. They went down, they and all those with them went down alive into the pit. The earth closed over them, and they perished from among the assembly. All Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, lest the earth swallow us up also. They backed the wrong party again. And now, look at verse 35. It says, a fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. So you got this giant hole that opens up and takes the three leaders of the rebellion and all of their family and everything they have and sucks them down alive and then closes up over it. The 250 who were backing Korah, fire from the Lord goes out and strikes them dead, and all that's left is their censers, the metal that they were holding to hold the fire. Where did I lay off? Thank you. The Lord, I know we've done a lot of reading, but sometimes this is the best way. It says, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, tell Eleazar the son of Aaron the priest to pick up the censers out of the blaze, for they are holy, scattered the fire some distance away. The censers of these men who sinned against their own souls, let them be made into hammered plates as a covering for the altar. Because they presented them before the Lord, they are holy. They shall be assigned to the children of Israel. Eleazar the priest took the bronze censers, which those who were burned up had presented, and they hammered out as a covering on the altar to be a memorial to the children of Israel, that no outsider who is not a descendant of Aaron should come near to offer incense before the Lord. That didn't do it. Come near to offer incense before the Lord, that he might not become like Korah and his companions, just as the Lord had said to him through Moses. So, again, one of those stories, God acts decisively. There's no question it was the hand of God that brought that to pass, and identifies and reaffirms Moses is the chosen individual, and Aaron is the chosen tribe, chosen family, who is responsible for offering the sacrifices themselves. And the very next verse, they go on the complaint again. But we're going to stop there.